Unfortunately, there was not Wi-Fi access at the soccer field, and I'm desperately trying to find a Starbucks and got my laptop and my BlackBerry out on the soccer field trying to, orchestrate this in the middle. And it was wildly stressful. This was a executive who was going to be leaving an executive post of a major company, that it was going to make news. Officers of the company, legal documents need to be filed at the point that you announce that you're going to be leaving one entity and joining another entity. So just a really, really, really important situation to make sure it doesn't go wrong. But equally important is I've got a roster of 18 people who have committed to have this wonderful experience. These are some of my best friends. We've got our children playing on the sidelines, and the dads and the moms are all watching the kids. And there I am trying to juggle it all. And at the end of the day, even me who's been doing this for 22 years, absolutely recognize that I could have done probably 2 or 3 things in a big way differently. There was absolutely other people on the team that could have shouldered a larger part of the responsibility for the tournament play. I could have way easier gotten those folks involved. And on the flip side, even though that this was a very confidential situation that was going down, there were probably 2 or 3 things that I also could have prepared very differently for, the evening or 2 prior that wouldn't have made, that particular Saturday so stressful. So, it's one sort of simple example, but I think, again, it's mindset going into it. I'm going to get through it, and we'll get through it in the right ways, and I'm going to get through it with positivity. The outcome is going to be a good one. And so we'll talk a little bit about mindset in particular. But I think that has a lot to do with, when you wake up in the morning, I view, my career is, I'm not here to just survive. I'm grateful that I get to have 2 beautiful children and a career that I enjoy. And, I think even the frustrating moments, there's lessons to be learned. And that, I think, also leads directly to this whole notion of mindset is, I think I'm here to learn lessons. And again, whether they're positive or they're challenging or they're frustrating, I think there's a lesson in everything. And I think, then choosing how you respond to that, maybe how you change your tone for next time, or maybe choose to do something a little different in the next situation. But I really do think it's all about mindset.
Great, thank you. Shelli, how do you take stress and sort of redirect it so it becomes something positive?
Great question. And I too had a recent situation. I've been in my role at McAfee for about 6 months now. And some of our executives would say that makes me a veteran. It does. It's about corporate culture, right? But the transition for me was really a little bit more stressful than I had anticipated. And I found it to be a learning experience. So I took that opportunity and really intentionally tried to observe myself learning in a moment. And also at the same time, I was taking on the new sport of cycling, which there were a lot of parallels for me in these 2 transitions. I had decided, because of multiple recurring knee injuries, that running was no longer my sport. And so I was taking up cycling. And what I learned from cycling that I applied in my transition to the new role at a new company after having been at my previous company for 9 years, which in technology is an eternity.
Or 17.
Or 17. It's also huge. Right. I can't imagine that transition. But so it's stressful is my point. And what I learned from cycling was really you have to learn your equipment. And what that meant to me was know what you're good at, know what your strengths are, know how you use those gears when you're climbing a hill and when to shift them and that sort of thing. And the same was true in my transition situation. I know that I have a certain skill set and set of strengths and qualities that I do well and other things that I don't do well. And knowing how to manage those in stress is incredibly important. The second lesson was time in the saddle. Again, you don't just get stamina, you earn it by doing it. And the same was true also with my transition. It takes time to build those relationships and to learn the new culture and to learn the people and build the relationships and all of that. So you have to sort of give yourself the benefit of the doubt through that transition and through that stressful time. And then the last lesson for me from cycling that I applied to the transition also was really, you're going to fall. I had, for those of you who have spent any time cycling, I had just purchased the clip-in shoes where you're actually attached. And everybody I knew told me, you're going to fall. And I accepted that, and I didn't want to believe that it was going to be true, but it was in fact true, and I remember the time when I did it. Thankfully, it was not in an intersection. It was actually in a parking lot leading up to a Starbucks. But I had literally popped out one of the clips on the right side, and I fell left. So and it was one of those slow motion, I'm falling. Right? Stop it.
It happens to everybody.
It happens to everybody. So thankfully, my response was, well, I'm glad that's over with. And I think that in stressful times and in transitional times, it's so important to just give yourself the opportunity and the permission to say, you know, I'm going to make mistakes. And that's part of the learning curve. And it's part of the process. And it's so important to do the post-experience debriefs to get those nuggets of truth. And that reflection is critical.
That's great. Thank you. I think, and just listening to Barbara and Shelli, I think one of my lessons learned that relates to that is in the sport of triathlon. In triathlon, there's 3 activities, right? So you swim, you bike, and you run in that order. And the long distance triathlons that I do, you have anywhere between, it takes between 14 and 16 hours. So we start at 7 in the morning, and at 9 and 10 o'clock at night, then I'm just finishing up the marathon. So it's a long day. And we use a term called managing yourself inside the box. So, when you start off at the beginning of the day, I know that I have to swim 2.4 miles, bike 112, and then do a marathon. If I thought about that, I would never finish, right? So I think about, so I'm in the swim, what can I manage, right? So I know that maybe for the next 300 yards, I can really manage my breathing, I can manage my technique, I can think about how I'm going to be successful until I get to the next point. And the same thing happens on the bike, and the same thing happens on the run. There's a certain kind of box that I sort of put around my activities that I know gives me some parameters for my performance and allows me to kind of compartmentalize and control what I'm doing. And I think that's one of the things that helps me, not just to get through a race, but helps me to get through a stressful situation. It helps me to get through a long day. It helps me, when I'm facing some big issue, I think, okay, let me just think about what can I actually manage and control right now? What are the things that I have influence over? What decisions can I make? I can't think about the end game right now, because if I do, it totally throws me off, and it's too far out there. So when you're in your day, and you're thinking about everything you have in front of you, you have work and your family, and you have whatever you're doing outside of work, and you have your commute. As you come up to those stressful times, if you can just sort of step back, take a deep breath, and think about that managing yourself, as I say, inside the box. That really helps me.
And I think just to parallel that same thought process to navigating your career, you can draw an almost direct correlation to thinking about that very similarly. So, there's that question, where do you want to be in 5 years? Where do you want to be in 10 years? I don't know. Some people do, and that's okay. But for people maybe earlier in their career or mid-career looking to do a bit of a reinvention, it's okay if you don't have a 20-year plan for what you think Barbara Massa should look like 20 years from now. But what you could look at is, what is it that really lights my fire? From a job perspective. Do I love to talk? Do I love to speak? Am I a linear thinker? Do I like to problem solve? What are the elements to the job that really make you get passionate about it? If you don't like to talk, don't get my job. Stay away from recruiting, stay away from,
that impression already, right? So you already know that about her, right?
Stick me in a room where I have to work on one problem and I will go batty. But whereas some people, that really is what makes them tick. They want to solve problem. And so career-wise, think about the skills and experiences that also could grow you broadly, right? So if you think about your box here, what is it that you want to kind of grow? You can be short windows of time, year increments, 2-year increments, and oftentimes the most rich career experiences will grow you broadly, not necessarily upwardly. You think, oh, I got to get that next title. How do I get to be a manager? How do I get to be a director? How do I get to be a VP? And if you do all the right building blocks and kind of grow yourself broadly, that opportunity then to go up will obviously be there for the taking. So I think that's a direct correlation I can draw.
Yeah, it's great input. So now what we'd like to do, now we've had some little bit of introduction here. So we're going to talk about what we think are 3 keys to success. I mean, there's obviously others, but the first one is attitude and mindset, right? So we're going to each talk a little bit about how, why we think that's important, and that's all about, how do you create the right mindset? How do you stay in tune with what's right for you? How do you associate yourself with the right people? Either one of you want to talk about attitude and mindset in terms of really being able to thrive versus survive.
Yeah, I would say that attitude and mindset really start as a choice. It's a difficult choice sometimes, especially when you're feeling overwhelmed or when you feel powerless in some situations. But I really do believe that the attitude and mindset is a deliberate choice we have to make, and that drives how we think about ourselves, how we think about the situation, and that in turn drives what we say to ourselves and to others about the situation. And that leads us to how we act and what choices and behaviors we enact in that situation.
Yeah, I think, I touched on it just a little bit, but absolutely resonate with what Shelli said, that, it really is an active choice. And, I just think about, okay, so you think about Facebook, right? You scroll through, see what your friends are up to and colleagues, and some people have mixed Facebook accounts. And I'll bet all of you can draw a stark contrast to those in your circle that are putting information or status or postings that tend to be on the negative end, or that tend to be on the positive end. If you just think about that one little lens, you got the friends that, bad day at work or stuck in traffic, and that might be. But again, what is it you're choosing to say to yourself? What is it you're choosing to say to the circle of people around you about, just things that maybe are going to land on the more positive end? Not being Pollyanna, we know there's a lot of challenge in this world. But again, making an active choice to be positive in your communications, I think is a huge first step. The second piece of this is, again, where I sort of get a lot of my stamina and energy is I'm just grateful. I'm grateful for my life. I'm grateful for the opportunities that have been presented to me. I'm grateful for the tragedies that I've had to deal with in my life. It just, even the bad stuff, there's lessons to be learned. I am able to afford nutritious food for my children. I'm able to have a warm home and my children have coats. I mean, down to really basic stuff that when, you think about you having a bad day or the challenges in our lives, it kind of doesn't hold a candle. So I feel like, my opportunity to then maybe give back to my community, to do things like this where I get to feel personally fulfilled by getting to talk to smart, bright men and women, by doing things like engaging with youth and trying to figure out helpful ways for them to get educated. I think that also sort of feeds your soul and again, kind of switches that mindset and that attitude a little bit. So,
does anybody here keep a gratitude journal? Do you know what that is?
I have one on my iPhone. It's called Gratitude.
Yeah,
and you can go in.
There's an app for that, huh?
There's an app.
My God, I might not surprise, right?
Yeah, there's an app for that. I like it.
I think that's really, and that's something I know a lot of people do. And maybe it's just at the end of the day. I mean, you don't just have to write it down, although it's helpful. But it's just sort of reflecting back, given all the negativity that surrounds you and all the challenges, what are the 1 or 2 things that I'm really grateful for every day? And it could be really simple things, but it just kind of resets your attitude. So I think that's a really important point, as well as, and this may seem really kind of basic, but surround yourself with people that are positive. There's probably people that you work with that are always like negative. It's always bad. It's always, and so, don't put up with that. Don't let that, affect you. Walk away from that person. Don't spend time with them. If you surround yourself with people who are positive and uplifting and inspirational, right, then that's going to affect your attitude as well. So a lot of it, right, as we said, is up here.